Hey guys, I'm your host David Brear and welcome to Fintech Insider On Air, episode 23 now. Thank you so much for everybody who joined us last week. Really great show. I can't believe it was like a week ago we were over in Money 2020. It was amazing. The last one of these we did was with Valentina Christensen in sunny Amsterdam, and it's definitely not that in London today. If you want to go check that out, head over to the 11FS Twitter or YouTube channel and you can catch up on all of those. This week, we're back at home, which is good. Stable ground again here in London, which is nice. And we're going to be talking about B2B marketing, particularly how is that affecting things that we're doing, but also how we're seeing other fintech players really come into this space. To discuss this, we've got a new face in the office, which is good. Me and you have been hanging out for a long time, but but actually, we've got Mr. Eric Fulwiler. Am I saying that right? Because I know you keep saying like I say it wrong, but I just think you say it wrong.
That's all right. I haven't had a boss for a while that could pronounce my name correctly, so the bar is low.
Is it? Well, that's good. I always like it when the bar's low. Tell us a little bit more about. you've just joined 11FS.
Yeah.
Give us a bit of your background.
Yeah, day 8, I guess it is.
Yeah.
Although some of those Money 2020 days counted as 2.
That's pretty sure they did.
But no, week 2, super excited to be here. A little bit about me. So I joined from the advertising agency side of the world, I guess. So almost the last decade in bigger advertising agencies. So most recently, I was at VaynerMedia, which is an American-based, digitally focused, full-service advertising agency, about 1,000 people, so one of the larger independents, and I moved over to London from their HQ in New York about 3.5 years ago to open and scale operations for the UK and Europe. So my background in other agencies before that, and a little bit in the startup world in New York and publishing, but my background is really on kind of the brand strategy, creative development, media distribution, kind of full service, modern day marketing, if you will. So the world of fintech is somewhat new to me. I've worked on financial service clients from the ad agency side of things, but super excited to get dropped in and kind of just learn about this magical, fun world of fintech.
And magical it is indeed. I think when we've spoken, I think we align very well on actually the principles of actually how you do these things, and really sort of talking about how do you do B2B marketing in today's age. We were trying to start with a few sort of statistics, but if you look at the view on 89% of B2B marketers are using content marketing, and I say using because people are doing it in various different degrees. I think we're very heavy on that from 11FS's perspective, and some people treat it in a slightly different way, but we'll get into that in a second. Content marketing generates 3 times as many leads as paid search, which I was quite surprised at. And I would have thought we can kind of get into this, but the quality of those types of leads in terms of what people are kind of generating, very different if you're establishing your expertise as opposed to just gaining data, gaining access to data. And the last one is only 37% of companies have a content marketing strategy in place, which is pretty damn worrying. So given the other 2 statistics, given how important this type of stuff is actually for your business, the fact that people are not really taking it seriously enough and getting this stuff in place is kind of worrying. But so, to start us off, we talk a lot about using B2C channels with what we do, whether it's Foundry or Pulse with the B2B side of things. I know this is something that me and you've sort of talked a lot about before, but is that the way that it's going?
So there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
First of all, just to pick up on something you said, the stat of 37% or whatever of companies, only 37% have a content marketing strategy is worrying, but it's also an opportunity for companies that can understand the potential of the impact of doing things that way, and actually, more importantly, as I know you like to say, execution is everything, actually put something into market and getting started with that type of approach. But to answer your question, from my perspective, not only are things going that way, things are already there. It's just a question of how quickly people can catch up if they're not already doing it. So if you zoom out from the fintech conversation, from the B2B, B2C conversation, and you just talk about marketing, the role of marketing and just good marketing in general delivers some type of value. Historically, if you go all the way back, that value could have just been offering a product that people would have wanted to buy.
Yeah.
Now, because there are so many different options for the products that we need to buy, and a lot more kind of security that people know that something they're going to buy off the shelf is at least going to be base level quality. You don't really need the brand anymore to tell you, if it's like a box of cereal or whatever, that it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Now there's kind of like a next stage of, it's no longer about that like interruption marketing of like you're just getting your message in front of people and pushing like your communication. It needs to be more about how are you bringing value. So I think that's the fundamental shift at like the top of this conversation, is it becomes more about the audience and the customer and the consumer and how you use marketing to bring value, as opposed to what it used to be, and where so many companies, especially B2B companies, still are, which is more about extracting value and how you get your message in front of them. And so the B2B, B2C conversation, I think, and part of the reason that, you know, I think there's so much opportunity here with what we do, B2B sometimes in the world of advertising can get a little bit of a bad rap. It's like less exciting. There's no like Super Bowl or you know, Christmas spots. But I think that, to your earlier point of liking the bar being low sometimes, so many B2B organizations are stuck in more of a sales mentality when they think about marketing.
Yeah.
It's about the short-term extraction of value. But really the opportunity, because so many people are in that place, is to take this playbook and this model of what we're talking about and, like you were saying, take more of a B2C approach to getting to the B, so to getting to the actual customer, of creating content that actually brings value to people, which is exactly what you and the fantastic team here have done over the last 3 years.
And is that, I guess, in that sense, it's more of a challenge for people, isn't it? Because if you're, to your point, actually, and I sort of made this point a lot about B2C marketing to a certain degree, is that it's moving dramatically away from saying what you're going to do to actually doing it and talking about that. So I guess in the B2B sense, if you want to create value, that's actually quite hard, isn't it? You know, it's no longer just you know, sticking your brand on a thing, as you say. It's actually being in a situation where you're really thinking about your user and their users.
100%, and it's very hard for any organization, the marketing function of any organization, to think that way. And really, the people that pull the purse strings and the political strings of where that marketing department needs to go, so the CEO, CFO, board, to really get on board with that, because it doesn't feel natural, because you're actually not thinking like an advertiser, you're thinking more like a publisher, right? And so you know, great example, obviously I'm a little bit biased, but what you've done here, and you know, now I'm a part of and will certainly be fueling and growing, is you've literally built like a media company into the marketing function. So, you know, Simone and Hannah and the rest of the team that are involved in producing all this great content, like they operate much more like a publisher of who is our audience, how do we produce content that's going to be valuable to them, how do we kind of, you can call it inbound marketing, but it's just how do you deliver value through content and communication, modern day content and communication channels. And like some of your earlier stats of how it generates leads, like that does translate into business. Yeah. It's just a different way of kind of thinking about the funnel and going to market.
Do you think there's an element, I'm in some instances I'm like, let's not overanalyze this too much, but do you think in like the fintech sense, and I know like say you're sort of coming into this space, but I guess anything where there's a really strong community, you know, like almost a fintech for people kind of who work in this space, I mean like the people who are watching right now, like this is a thing that their passion is, you know, like they're so passionate about this subject matter, therefore the community is really strong around value creation around it. I mean, B2B companies where, I mean, you're not selling a dream or you're not selling something aspirational for them, it's a harder sell at that sense. So I guess to almost like, have we got this easy? Because, I mean, there's a really untapped audience out there that actually are in a situation where there isn't something out there doing what we do. Is that, I mean, I worry about this, so I'm not gonna lie, like, and this is an interesting insight for you guys, because it's like, this is more as, I guess, having a one-to-one around what we're going to be doing over the next
Nobody's
year.
watching, it's totally fine.
But do you know what I mean? It's like, it's an interesting dilemma there, isn't it? Because if it's somebody's passion, actually you can engage them and bring them into a community. If it's I mean, if we're doing core banking stuff with Foundry, I mean, the traditional way of doing core banking marketing for a really big, really boring kind of subject matter is much more dry, much less engaging. Yeah. But I just don't understand why this stuff just can't be fun. I think that's my general gist on everything, really.
Yeah, that's always your approach. I mean, I think that things seem easy when they come naturally, And so, you as a CEO and a founder of this company, that's very much how you see the world, obviously. And so I think that it seems easy to you, but not a lot of other people in that type of space, again, especially in B2B, kind of think about that. So I don't necessarily think that it's hard, think of the right way to say this. I don't think that it's necessarily that complicated. I think that it's hard to do well,
Sure.
and it's even harder to accept and acknowledge and then start acting on the fact that this is how things should go. And by the way, this works for us. This is what I believe. I've seen this work very well in the world of B2B with massive enterprise global companies all the way down to SMBs. Yeah. So I do genuinely believe what I'm talking about, believe in what I'm talking about. But there are different ways to do it. But I think the other thing, while I'm still kind of getting up to speed and looking at the fintech scene, there are a lot of similarities with industries that I know much better, like the world of FMCG, retail, entertainment. And it's always interesting because whenever companies are younger makes it sound too simplistic, but when a company is started from scratch in a world where the media landscape looks very different to what it did when a company that's 50 years old was started, the way they think about things is just completely different because that's the only world that they knew. And I think that that is such an advantage if you look at the likes of Monzo and Revolut and everything that's going on in the fintech space. Is like the playbook to them is going to seem easier and simpler and more obvious because that's the world that they were born into. Yeah. Whereas classic innovator's dilemma, the incumbents in financial services or any of the industries that I've worked in from the advertising standpoint, they have to change their model and actually sacrifice and break and rebuild something that's been built over the last 50, 100, or even longer in the world of banking years. And so that's a advantage for the companies that are new in the world of fintech. But I like the thing that you always say of you'll always bet on the people that have the customers and have the money, right? If those bigger organizations can kind of get there and get aligned strategically, I think there's a huge opportunity, but that is a big if.
Yeah, and does that lead to a swing in the mix to a certain degree in terms of big organizations, either B2B or B2C, have generally sort of spent in certain areas in terms of their marketing mix? Are we going to see a real swing of people kind of moving to more, I don't want to say new media, but more new media stuff. So, social is getting bigger and bigger and bigger for B2C and B2B companies, but equally what we do, like this or podcasts or whatever. Do you see people kind of moving much more and more to, I guess, more authentic kind of marketing channels?
Yeah. I think that any channel works, right? So in the sense that whenever there's an audience, there's an opportunity to market something. Yeah. But of course, it comes down to how well you do it, and also comes down to kind of the cost of distribution on that channel. So that's something that I think about a lot. History repeats itself, right? So if you look at the history of media in marketing and those channels, whenever something is new, it's less proven, it's less trusted. And the companies that were built on the back of older and legacy media channels kind of keep it at arm's length. They are not the first movers. The ones who are the first movers are more the challengers and the upstarts and the companies that, again, were kind of born into this world. So there's an inherent advantage there because we see it, we take advantage of it, and it's harder to kind of move these bigger organizations in that direction. But I think there is more risk inherent in that because, again, it's not proven, it's not as kind of accepted, but there's also an opportunity because the attention, I've spent so many years in the world of Gary Vee, so a lot of my thinking is shaped by how he and his team and that company see the world. There is that attention arbitrage, to use some of his words, which is just true and right, of you have to think about not just is the channel going to work, but also what's the price of actually earning the attention on it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I wonder, back to my point, like you say, about actually more and more people are going to be swinging to this because it's working for smaller companies. Like fintech's in an interesting place because essentially you've got small companies who are, as you say, born into acting and working and shaping in these ways. But then being in a situation where big companies try and emulate small companies, there's the whole thing of marketeers ruin everything, right? Yeah. There's a deluge of podcasts or blogs or whatever kind of coming out in terms of this space, and everybody's an expert in this and that and da 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 da. Almost is there a worry, I guess, not just in the fintech industry but generally, but that you've got this kind of plethora of content sort of washing over this, it almost becomes an element of like, who do you trust and how do you do it? How do you really get cut through when there's so much content out there?
Yeah, it's a much larger conversation that spans outside the world of just marketing. So I won't necessarily take that bait. However, when it comes to the world of marketing, I think that if you bring it all back to kind of technology, which of course is leading this disruption and creates all of these opportunities, the landscape of media is so fundamentally different than it was even 10, 12 years ago, much less 30, 40 years ago, which in many ways is the model that many incumbent businesses are still operating on. But even just a few years ago, I mean, the pipeline of distribution of how much content people are consuming in different places and in different ways, not just social media, but Facebook versus Instagram versus Twitter versus Snapchat versus TikTok versus everything else that's out there. Podcast, you have voice, of course you have like video. There's just so many different ways for us to consume content now, and we're consuming so much more of it. So I think fundamentally, the way that you need to think about content marketing is very different than the way you used to think about kind of campaign-driven advertising. So you really need to think of how do you prioritize quality and the value that you're bringing it back to where we started this conversation, but also you need to compete for share of voice and share of mind in those channels where there's just so much more of it now. So I think that that's something that people really need to think about, and again, lends itself to kind of that publisher media type of approach. It's not just, okay, what's our campaign for this quarter, but our audience cares about X. How do we bring them the content, the information, the entertainment, the personalities that's actually going to deliver them value around that topic?
I think the thing I've always found, really found nice about the way in which we've created this content is when it's consumed to a certain degree. So whether it's things like this, where people are consuming it on like a coffee break, or whether it's the podcast people are listening to when they're walking the dogs or cutting the grass or whatever, like you're increasingly moving into people's personal time rather than their business time. And again, it's that blurred line between B2B things and the B2C version of like something that people are truly passionate about. And it creates a different level of connectivity, I think. If again, the difference between like my spelling and grammar is terrible, so if you've ever like had the absolute displeasure of reading one of my blog posts, then the difference between like reading something and like fundamentally listening to somebody, like the words and the intonation and actually how they sort of position things, it's really different. I think you get such a different level of understanding,
Yeah.
Does that lead to brands, I guess? I mean, like I worked at plenty of brands where, they were A, terrified that I had a social media account in the first place, but B, being in a situation where your brand is many people's voices. I don't think your brand voice is just, our brand voice is not the 11FS tone type thing. It's very much different people having different opinion. Like the podcast for us is, 3 or 4 people from 11FS having a debate, having an argument, disagreeing on something, but being able to put all of that out. Brands, I think big brands are really nervous about that. You've got the media training and everything that goes with it to be able to speak. And it kind of comes back to that point that you made around authenticity. It's very hard to be fake and be unauthentic when you're using such authentic media channels, right?
Yeah, there's a lot in there, so digesting, but I think a few things. So where you started, in terms of like dipping into people's personal time, I think people will always want to consume good content, if that's at work, if that's at home, if that's walking the dog. So I actually think that the kind of advent of technology and mobile and everything that's been built on top of that platform, if it's social feeds, if it's podcasts, if it's being able to read all of your news in one place, I think that is just kind of giving people the opportunity to choose how they maximize their downtime. Because it used to be like when you walk the dog, you just walk the dog. Now you can walk the dog and actually learn something, right? And there's a debate to be had about like how much kind of content we're inundating ourselves with, and like when we need to tune out and stuff like that.
I feel
Topic for another time.
Yeah, I feel like my dog's getting a worse quality of walk.
Attention. But for real though, I think there is a conversation very off topic on the kind of like parenting and kids front, which I know we've talked about before, that I'm very interested in, because don't want to go too far down this path, but kind of with social media, there is a lot of that, like, what is it doing to our families and all that stuff. And I think it so much depends on the person and just kind of them taking accountability for how they manage it. As with any technology, it's a tool. It depends on how you use it. Bringing it back. So I think that people will always consume good content. And again, to come back to what, the kind of tippy top of kind of what I'm preaching and what I believe in, and I know you do too. Again, if you think like a publisher instead of an advertiser, and you bring content to the audience that's going to be valuable to them, then they are going to want to, consume it. They're going to want to listen to it, and it's not going to be it's a fintech podcast, therefore I only listen to it when I'm at work type of thing. It's good content. It's entertaining. It's valuable. I'm going to listen to it whenever I want to. The other part of what you were talking about, which to me kind of synthesizes like brand control and consistency. I 100% believe in authenticity. I think that that is the only way to truly scale, and it's also the easiest way, because if you're trying to be somebody that you're not, that's really hard. That's a really hard kind of charade to keep up, right? And I do think that there is a evolution, maybe not a revolution, but an evolution of how we think about modern day branding. It used to be that everything was under lock and key. There was a holy Bible of a brand book. The font needed to be this, that needed to be there, like nitty gritty type of thing, right? And to a certain extent, I do see the value in that type of philosophy, because people want consistency. But at the same time, it's a different world, and people are interacting with brands in very different ways. And so I think there is an opportunity to kind of nuance or personalize the content that you put out. And I would say from an 11FS perspective, while we, I think, are very authentic in terms of like, it's just sitting down and having a chat and hoping that some people will find it valuable, we also do have the logo and the brand book, and like there's no semicolon when it's printed like that. That's and it's true. Black and white and neon mint, and so there is kind of this balance. And I think it's a balance, and I think it depends on who your audience is and who your sector is, and more importantly kind of who you are and that authentic piece. And I do think that while you shouldn't completely decentralize and deconstruct the brand to the point where like you just listen to whatever people tell you and give them exactly what they want. Like there is something to that whole kind of paradigm of like, the Henry Ford quote of if he had listened to what people had asked for, it would have just been a faster horse. Like there is a role for creative vision and creative talent to create a brand in a visual standpoint. But I think it's a balance of the two.
Cool. I mean, yeah, definitely people always give brand meaning, don't they? I think that's the thing that, and definitely from our perspective, it's less about the colon or not the colon, it's more about people and what they do. So, I mean, we could probably talk about this for
I feel like I'm talking so much. Do I get to interview you at any point?
I mean, at some point. I mean, it's week 2, so like at some point, definitely.
I have questions.
So, I mean, it's too late. You're here now. If you had any questions, it's far too late. But we'll definitely revisit these things a bunch as we're going through, and I think it's great to have you and Eric. I'm looking forward to working with you more and more. On that note, we probably should wrap up because you've got a meeting to go to in about 3 minutes.
Keeps me busy.
Which is good. So on that note, I think probably what we'll do is go, like, Eric, where can people find out more from you?
Can Google me.
Yeah.
Eric Fulwiler. And then Eric with a C at 11fs.com is my primary inbound source right now.
Very good. As for me, you can find me over on Twitter at David Brear. Thanks very much for tuning in this week. If you want to more insight like this, but I mean, Eric's a handsome man, but if you don't want to see my face, just head over to iTunes, search for Fintech Insider or one of the other podcasts that we do, and you can get all of the noise without the face. It's a horror. I'm truly sorry about this. If you do want to get in touch and actually suggest some other topic that you want to go through, either send me a DM on Twitter or send me an email on david@11fs.com. And last but not least, unfortunately, me and a few of the team are going to be out next Wednesday, but you're going to be left in very safe hands with Sarah Kachansky. So,
can I say something real quick before we wrap up? So, shout out and a request to the community. Since I am new to this world, I'm trying to connect with as many people as possible from the world of fintech, financial services, anything related. So I would really love to connect with you. Either send me an email, eric@11fs.com, or my Twitter handle is tagged in the push and promotion that we've been doing for this show. But I really would love to kind of connect with some new people off the back of doing this. So,
I mean, careful what you wish for, dude. But yeah, hit him up on email. That'd be good. All right, guys. Catch you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.